Okay, everybody, welcome back. Email us as always, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to our podcast. That is the Charlie Kirk Show podcast page. And we're here at the Bitcoin.com studio. Joining us now is Megan Basham, author of Shepherds for Sale and Daily Wire culture reporter. Megan, I'm so glad to have you on here. You live in Charlotte, where the killing of Iryna Zarate Scott occurred, who was an incredible person, a Ukrainian refugee, comes to America and was murdered in cold blood for no reason, a senseless killing by a black person. If a random white person simply walked up to and stabbed a nice, law-abiding black person for no reason, it would be an apocalyptically huge national story used to impose national sweeping political changes on the whole country. Instead, Megan Basham, no one seems to care when a white woman gets stabbed to her death. Why is that?
Yeah, that was pretty shocking to go, for 2 weeks now, none of our major media outlets have covered her at all, not one word. They finally started to cover her a little bit this morning, but only because of the massive public shaming, because this video was so very shocking. And what I really want to emphasize here, Charlie, is that this is not a dangerous part of town where Zarate Scott was killed. It's a very lovely, popular part of town, bustling restaurants, trendy restaurants, boutiques. My family and I go there frequently on the weekend. So this was an area where you will see families on the weekend. She's a young woman, 23 years old, a refugee, getting off work at a pizzeria and gets onto that light rail. So, the initial reaction of our Democrat mayor was appalling. She said that she didn't mention Iryna Zarate Scott at all in her initial statement. Instead, what she called for was compassion for the perpetrator, who she said is suffering from mental illness, just like cancer or heart disease. So we're supposed to have empathy for him as some sort of victim. And she said that we cannot arrest our way to safety, which is, of course, ridiculous. Yes, we can. If we put people behind bars when they're a public threat, we can have safe public streets. But, just to go a little bit more into the weeds on this, I want to let you know that our current governor, who was then Attorney General, his response has also been appalling. So back in 2020, within 2 weeks of George Floyd's murder, he had not only issued public lament. Well, I think at this point we can say it was not a murder, but he issued public lament over George Floyd's death, and instituted a new task force for racial equity in criminal justice system. So he initiated an entire task force for George Floyd's death, but it took him longer to acknowledge Iryna Zarate Scott's death. It took him 2 more days than it did to acknowledge George Floyd, even though this happened in his own state where he is governor. So if you look back at what that task force that he implemented in 2020 did, they specifically called for more lenient pre-release policies, meaning they wanted low bail or no bail for minority offenders. They also called for decriminalizing homelessness and quote unquote public behavior, meaning being a public menace on the streets. So these were the very policies that allowed this perpetrator, Dicarlo Brown, to be on the streets. He did, in fact, receive pretrial release back in January on his most recent arrest, because he's been arrested 14 times before, including for grand larceny and breaking and entering and assault with a deadly weapon. And almost every time he has been released and given fines and community service and probation. He has not been behind bars where he belongs. And so these were the direct policies that came out of that racial equity task force.
I have so many questions here. So let me just ask a micro question. Has this been talked a lot about in local communities in Charlotte, North Carolina? Are people understanding the racial element here, that a random black guy murdered a white woman? Is it shocking the community? Walk us through what's happening locally here, because I would imagine it should be.
Yeah, I think it is. One of the things you're hearing is that this was a light rail that we all felt perfectly safe using just a few years ago, and we don't feel that way anymore. Because of these policies, you are suddenly seeing an increase in homelessness in the Charlotte area. We came here in 2016, and when we first got here, you really didn't see panhandlers, public disturbances on the street. You see that now when you go into our uptown metro areas. And so I think so many people are feeling that. And when you look at the increasing rates of crime in Charlotte, you can trace it back to 2020. So our last homicide high was in 2020 when the Black Lives Matter riots were occurring on our streets. And the second high of homicide rates in Charlotte were now 2024. So we don't have it for 2025 yet. But for 2024, when they were up 25% from the year before, when these racial equity policies started taking effect. So yes, I think people are very much waking up to the fact that, you know, all of these sort of Black Lives Matter, DEI pushed policies are having a direct impact on our safety, because the argument was, for the sake of racial equity, we need to not jail Black offenders. We need to give them fines and probation. And look, Charlie, this guy's mother, Dicarlo Brown's own mother, tried to get him involuntarily committed. She has said he was not safe to be on the streets, and she actually tried to do something because she knew he was a threat. And instead, we have a criminal justice system here that was sold out to social justice instead of actual justice.
So now I want to transition to the Christian element here. So you have a great book, Shepherds for Sale. You've also called out all the wokeism stuff. Has Stephen Furtick, whatever his name is, spoken out against this? Because he was really big, Elevation Church, big BLM guy about George Floyd. Has Stephen Furtick, the popular megachurch pastor, has he spoken out against the black criminal who killed a white woman on a bus? Because he's in Charlotte.
You know, I haven't specifically checked on what Stephen Furtick has said, but it feels like if he did speak out, that would certainly be something making news in our area. And I have heard nothing about that. In fact, I have heard nothing from many of the
weird. That's strange.
Yes, from the social justice pastors who are very popular in this area. Derwin Gray is another. I have heard nothing from him. And so you have so many of these church leaders who got on board with Black Lives Matter. They got on board with these DEI policies. And now they have suddenly very much backed away from quote unquote political issues now that we're starting to see the fruit of what these policies have borne. And it is actually the innocent citizens of North Carolina who are bearing the brunt of these policies.
Why is it that pastors were so quick to talk about the drug overdose of George Floyd, but they won't talk about this?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious why. You know, at that time, there was a desire to curry favor with the progressive wing, to be winsome. And so that's why they really want to appeal to I would say, the elite class of our society. And when they look at the elite class, they see the New York Times, the Atlantic, CNN, and those are the people who they want plaudits and applause from. And so those are the people that they will go out and appeal to. And yet, when you see crimes like this, where this, you know, horrific stabbing of an innocent young woman who came here from a war-torn country, and it actually turns out she probably would have been safer in her war-torn country than in a large American city. They go very, very quiet because that is not appealing to that particular urban upper class professional that they want to appeal to. So suddenly, you know, we had so much politics from these people prior to Donald Trump's election in 2025, and now we hear nothing from them. Now it's let's not politicize the pulpit, even though, you know, this is a moment for pastors to speak into, because you have a community that is hurting, that is scared, and they want to know, you know, what are some of the answers to this kind of pain. And look, the Bible does have answers about justice. If a man like this had been incarcerated and punished as he should have been when he initially broke into people's houses, when he committed armed robbery, when he committed assault with a deadly weapon, then he wouldn't have been on the streets to commit these crimes. But they don't talk about those elements of biblical wisdom that tell us that the government exists to terrorize the unrighteous and the wicked, not to ensure that the innocent can be terrorized. And that's exactly what's happened in this situation.
I'm going to send a tweet to Mr. Furtick, whatever his name is, in the break. Megan Basham, stay right there. AlanJacksonMinistries.com. Go to AlanJackson.com/Charlie. It's AlanJacksonMinistries.com. We're honored to be partnering with Alan Jackson Ministries. And today I want to point you to their podcast. It's called the Culture and Christianity Podcast, the Alan Jackson Podcast. What makes it unique is Pastor Alan's biblical perspective. He takes the truth from the Bible and applies it to the issue we're facing today: gender confusion, abortion, immigration, Doge, Trump, and the White House, and the issues in the church. The Culture and Christianity Podcast is informative and encouraging, and you can find it on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Alan Jackson Ministries is working hard to bring biblical truth back into our culture. Go to alanjackson.com /Charlie. That is alanjackson.com /Charlie. alanjackson.com /Charlie. Email us, as always, freedom@charliekirk.com. So just to repeat, the largest pastor in Charlotte, North Carolina is a guy by the name of Stephen Furtick. He's got tens of millions of followers on social media. He posted endlessly about George Floyd, endlessly. And yet he has not had a single tweet of a murder in his own city. It's really weird, isn't it? He was really upset about a drug overdose of a black guy in Minneapolis, but not a murder of a white woman in his own town. Be right back.